Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. Thank you, Maureen. I find it a little ironic that Carol, who just spoke to you a little bit about her heritage and everything, she's dressed as a typical American woman. I am not dressed as a typical American woman. I'm dressed as a typical Korean woman, and I'm not Korean at all, am I? No. So, how in the world did I get involved in with the Korean culture, and why am I dressed the way I am? Well, we all have family stories, and my family story, one of them anyway, goes like this. At the end of World War II, most of you don't remember that, you're way too young. You remember. This is my grandson, and he's helping me out tonight. He doesn't remember any of this. Anyway, my father was asked to help the Korean country put its businesses back together again after the long duration. So I don't know why he was asked. He was an Air Force pilot in reconnaissance, but for some reason, they thought that he would be just the person to help out the general who was going to be helping the Korean people put their society back together again. But my father said, yes, I'd be happy to go and do that if my family can come. His family consisted of his wife and me. So my mother and I got on a train in Grand Rapids, Michigan, rode on that train for 5 days. And when I tell the children 5 days, it's like going to school and not leaving for a whole week. 5 days on a train with a little girl who was bored out of her mind. But that was only the beginning of our trip. That got us as far as Seattle. And then we got on a troop, no, it wasn't a troop transport ship, it was an oil tanker. Now, do not think Carnival Cruise Line. It had nothing to do with that. There was no accommodations for wives with children. This was no cruise ship, and it was not a cruise of a lifetime. It was not. Anyway, my mother and I ended up in Seoul, Korea. I have the telegram that my father sent back to his parents back in Lansing, Michigan, saying, Dottie and Sandy have arrived. And his life was complete. We lived in a little house that was built just for us. I have pictures of the house too. It was a wonderful house. It was a two-story house. We were very, very fortunate to be living in a two-story house because most Koreans had two-story houses. And we had two very special things in our house. We had electricity, which was very unusual. After all, this is 1947 in Korea. Yes. We had electricity. We had running water. We were very, very fortunate. Now, the people that had rushed to put our house together for us, because they were doing everything they could to accommodate my dad, they didn't understand too much about electrical wiring, it seems. So, when we were downstairs, and someone would want to go upstairs and turn on the light, all of the lights downstairs would go off, or vice versa. So if you were upstairs and you were reading, there was no electricity downstairs. If my mother would be turning on the kettle, all of a sudden you were in the dark upstairs. That's the way it was in our house. But we were very fortunate to have a house. And my dad did help the people over there, I'm really proud to say, and because of that experience, I just became very, very interested in this country. And I just kept that interest going for so many years. And when I got to Des Moines a few years back, and I discovered that they have the Korean Cultural Center, and that on the first Saturday in February, they sponsor a wonderful New Year's Day party, I went. And I met some wonderful, wonderful Koreans who told me that they had been adopted as very young children and had come over here and loved their adopted country, but they knew nothing about their own culture. So I got into telling the stories of the Korean culture. And that's how I got to be where I am today. And I love it. I had a lot of fun doing some history and reading, and I'm just really proud to say that my family had just a little bit to do with the marvelous success of South Korea today. Just a little bit. But anyway, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's called Me First. Me First. And it goes like this. Deer and rabbit and toad were sitting along, just minding their own business. They were having a nice conversation, and deer and rabbit and toad decided to say, well, how long have you been in this world? Well, I think I'm first, said deer. And Toad said, oh, no, I don't think so. Hare said, oh, I know I'm first. And it went back and forth like this. Hare and deer saying, oh, me, no, I was here first. And Toad said, well, since we're having this argument, why don't you tell me why you think you've been here longer than any other creature? And deer said, well, I'll tell you, this is how long I've been in this world. I stepped on this ladder, and this ladder went up and up and up and up, and I hung the stars. Oh, wow, you have been around for a very long time. But Hare said, oh no, I've been here longer than deer, because you know that ladder that he climbed on? I planted the tree that ladder was made of. Oh, well, then you must be first. So Hare and deer looked over at Toad and noticed that Toad was crying. Well, these weren't sad stories. Why in the world was Toad crying? Toad, why are you crying? Oh, your stories have made me so sad. I've been thinking, it makes me think of my 3 sons. Oh, yes, my 3 sons. My youngest son, why, he planted the tree that planted the tree that Hare planted. Oh. And my second son, well, he planted the tree that the hammer was made on, that deer hung those stars by. And my oldest son, yes, he planted the tree that was made into the frame that hung the moon and the stars and the sun. Hare and deer turned to Toad and said, "You're first." few crops. When I was living in Korea as a very young girl, they didn't have any food that I liked. I was only 3. So my grandmother would send Cheerios, which my grandson's been eating. And she also sent us something that was a very rare item over there, aluminum foil. Yes. There were no Stop and Shops over in Korea when I lived there in 1947. Thank you very much for listening.